Coming up on today's Next Fan Up, James, what do you call a podcast with only one superfan? An improvement. Ha ha! Dad Joke Thursday!
Oh, gosh. There you go. No. Gosh. Why are we doing this?
Here we go.
Can you guys hear me? Sorry, hold on.
32 superfans.
I couldn't understand a word they were saying.
One PodVader.
You fired up for that, man? Huh?
Every angle of the NFL covered.
We on go time. We still on go.
This is Next Fan Up.
We're live, bro.
Hello and welcome to Next Fan Up. I am Jay PodVader Soderberg, and this week, only one lonely superfan joins me on today's show. Hello, James, our Eagles superfan.
Okay, first of all, I'm not lonely. I have a cup and it's full. So take that.
Are you drinking beer for breakfast, as Monty has suggested is quite normal?
No.
Well, with only the two of us, I don't know if I'm going to be able to find those funny cuts that I normally put at the beginning of the podcast. It's going to be a little bit more difficult to do. But you did suggest I could throw in a couple of dad jokes here, and
no,
that would work.
I said it's no. I said you don't have to.
Oh, I don't have to. But if I did, that would be okay, because we need the funny open at the beginning of the show. That's the way these things work.
It's not dad jokes. Not that joke.
Coming up on today's show, we've got more information coming from free agency as it's really slowed down. I feel like this happened last year too. We had this big flurry of action in week one, and we expected more action here in week two, but it really hasn't happened. It seems like all of the major signings are done. We're done. Free agency's over. Everybody can go home. But there are a few more that are trickling in, and we'll talk about those a little bit. There was a new television contract that was signed, and I don't necessarily want to get into the business of it because it's kind of boring, but I do want to talk about is how this will affect us as fans consuming the game moving forward. And then the NFL announced that they are going forward with a live NFL draft in Cleveland, Ohio at the end of April 29th. So we're going to talk about what they're planning on for the upcoming NFL draft, and we'll finish out the show with the best available free agents still out there. Does that sound like a show, James?
Yeah, it's a work in progress. I'm pretty sure we'll swerve at some point.
If you want to reach out to us and give us some feedback, we'd love to hear from you. nextfanup@gmail.com is the way to get in touch with us via email. We are available on all the social media platforms at NFU Podcast on Twitter. Facebook.com/NFU Podcast is another great place to continue the conversations with us. And of course, you can follow the podcast everywhere that you get your podcasts. Anywhere podcasts are heard, all you have to do is click the follow button, and the very next episode will be available to you. By the way, you'll want to do that because you can access the archives where we have, James, I counted, over 3 hours of reaction to the first week of NFL free agency. I mean, you're not going to get that anywhere else.
No, probably not.
All right. Let's jump into the news.
Things happen in the NFL. That's why there's This Week in the NFL. Yesterday, today.
For that, we do have the funky music. This Week in the NFL, yesterday, today. Hello, everybody. So, Deshaun Watson, it's got a little bit of a situation down there in Houston. And it's a whole...
Call it little anymore.
It's a whole lot of complicated. And I don't want to necessarily get into any sort of speculation because that's all it would be right now. There are 16 different lawsuits that have now been filed against Deshaun Watson, all claiming some various form of sexual assault or sexual harassment. It's not for us to speculate. I'm not a lawyer, so I can't even talk about the legalities of the situation. But it does bring up a very messy NFL situation as well. And with that, we can certainly speculate and discuss because, James, we are NFL Network experts. Last I checked.
Supposedly, that's what we claim.
I have read that there are conspiracy theories that the Texans are sort of behind this, although it does the Texans no good to have this type of information out there. It does keep Deshaun Watson firmly in Houston, as there's not going to be any other team that wants to be involved in this situation either way, whether he's innocent or he is proven guilty. Especially if he's proven guilty. To me, I would say if he's proven guilty, that's a lifetime suspension from the NFL, would you say?
If nothing else, in this day and age, we are, 2 years removed from the height and the fallout of the Me Too movement in Hollywood, which technically is still going on, considering the Snyder Cut just came out last week and the doubling down on the crap Joss Whedon has done out there is now reemerged. I remember almost 10 years ago when Roethlisberger skated by with his 2 cases here in Atlanta, Georgia, and the league quietly only gave him 4 years because the plaintiffs in those 2 separate cases decided not to press charges. So the prosecutors
4 games, not 4 years.
I mean, 4 games, sorry. 4 games is what he got because the 2 plaintiffs in each of those cases decided not to go forward with charges. So both cases were dropped. And when I say quietly, I do mean quietly. No one covered that story of Ben being suspended for 4 games to start that season. It was just something that was mentioned during preseason. Roethlisberger was going to miss the first 4 games of the season. No one said why. No one mentioned misconduct detrimental to the league, anything of that nature. Just the commissioner suspended him for 4 games, and they left it alone, glossed over it, moved right by it. Social media the way it is today, and one lawyer using it to his advantage, another lawyer waiting for more information so he can discredit the plaintiffs. There's no way Deshaun Watson comes out of this unscathed. If by some miracle, and I'm not saying he's guilty, but 16 lawsuits is beyond damning at this point. And even if he comes out completely innocent in all of this, the fact that there were 16 lawsuits, once is happenstance, twice is a coincidence, 3 times is a trend. We're 16. I don't know how. Like this is damning in a sense that I haven't seen before in a long time. And
so that's the part that I do want to caution against, James, because that is speculatory, and I don't want to speculate on innocence or guilt in this particular regard.
I don't either.
People can do that all for themselves. There's been plenty of reporting as to exactly what are in those depositions. Those depositions are part of the public domain, so you can access them and you can read the accusations that have been laid out against Deshaun Watson, and you can make your own decisions. There's also been plenty of reporting, and a lot of that revolved around the lawyers, Deshaun Watson's lawyers, defense of his player, where at least one of the plaintiffs has allegedly admitted to trying to blackmail Deshaun Watson. Again, allegedly reported.
Allegedly.
So there's going to be lots more news that comes out about this. But from an NFL standpoint, you have a quarterback who was disgruntled with his organization, reportedly did not want to play for the Houston Texans any longer. Him being traded seems to be very difficult. I don't think he can still be traded at this particular point in time. But if he
the phrase you're looking for is nigh impossible.
The question that I would have is, if he were to be traded right now, would it signify validity to the accusations or not at all?
I don't think it would. I think, okay, so I believe that where he finds himself right now, he can't be traded. If he is traded, it's going to be for virtually nothing because another team is going to have to take on that large contract that he just signed at the beginning of last offseason, right? You have the 16 lawsuits, pending against him. So if you're a team looking to acquire him, you're really not trying to give up what he's worth because of how damning everything is around him. You don't want to mortgage the farm, per se, as you would before any of this news came out. If none of this came out, if he was just a disgruntled player trying to get out of Houston, yes, we'd still be looking at teams in the quarterback market trying to give up 2-3 first-round picks and maybe half a dozen more on top of that scattered around over the next 3 to 4 years of the draft. Because that would be that's a whole warranting of a player of Deshaun Watson's caliber. Now with all of this going in, you're like, well, I'm not giving up first-round picks at all. Because if this guy gets suspended from the league, and if it's an indefinite suspension, how long is indefinite? 1, 2, 3 years? If it's a lifetime ban, his career's over, and I just gave up X number of draft picks to acquire somebody who's never going to play. And I think that's the pause button right now. Is that any team looking to fill their void at quarterback with a player of his caliber at his age is like, yeah, this is what I would give up. But if he gets suspended, he's not playing. And it'd be one thing if you could, forecast the future and say, well, even if, their best case scenario is a handful to maybe half of these lawsuits actually prove valid, that's still some form of suspension. And at the very least, you're talking about a year at this point. And honestly, I seriously believe that based on the outcome of this, he's suspended for a minimum of a year.
And by the way, it's important to note that these are civil suits. So there would not be any jail time associated with any of the activities. Well, if he were to be found guilty of any of the activities.
Well, the lawyer for the plaintiffs in this civil case does say he has evidence that he is still going to turn over to Houston PD.
Okay.
So if and when he does that, because he claims he's going to do it, he hasn't done it yet. If and when he does that, depending on what the police and the investigators of law enforcement find, it could be a criminal case going forward.
Well, I know this. It has often been said that a player's talent will outperform anything laid against him in regards to his timing on the field. I have a feeling this puts that statement to a very large test.
I don't think it will in this case, especially with the track record of the league, because as we move forward in time and Goodell's common sense catches up with the morality of a lot of the situations that some of these players have found themselves in, Josh Gordon has just been suspended again. I mean, let's take that into account. He had a suspension lifted last year. I can't remember what team he initially signed with or was supposed to sign with. He didn't. Halfway through the season, he took himself out of football. Then he was available to play towards the end of the season to try to help the team come back. I think the Seahawks had signed him to a contract for a couple of games or whatever. Then they released him. And then by the end of the season, he was suspended again. So I think this time it's indefinite. So
all right, well,
I don't know.
It is.
I don't want to call it a fluid situation, but it's one that's very murky at best right now.
It is a situation that bears watching, for sure. Speaking of messy situations, this came in from JP Finlay at JP Finlay NBCS. Dan Snyder will pay $875 million for the remaining 40.5% of the team and will also pay a fine for the Beth Wilkinson investigation results of quote-unquote executives' misconduct. That came from NYT Sports. That's the New York Times. Listen, again, this is another situation where this didn't have talent that made the problem go away. This was money made the problem go away. And in this particular case, Dan Snyder is making anybody who threatened to buy out his team go away.
Yeah, and remember that when the scandal with their cheerleaders broke news, the owners of that 40.5% were trying to force him into selling the team. Of course, they had no leverage because, again, they didn't own the majority of the franchise. There's no way they could force him to sell, his 59.5%. They just couldn't do it. This is a situation they find themselves in. I get it. They want out. They believe Stan Snyder is still culpable in some way for the quote-unquote executives involved in this. But we've all seen the stories that have come out from various front office personnel to even the former head coach. One Jay Gruden being involved in some of this. A former player has gone on various podcasts and radio shows and talked about how Jay Gruden was directly involved in a lot of the ill-gotten deeds that took place to these women. If anybody's unfamiliar, just look it up. There's stories ranging from cheerleaders having their passports taken from them the moment they landed in foreign countries to take care, I use quotes there, of VIPs, and were not giving them back until the trip was done. There was no way they could leave early. They were forced to do that. They were lied to as far as where their travels were taking them when they were leaving the country. They were not all for spreads in various locations for calendars. And it'd be interesting to see what this fine is that he has to pay. Because, remember, this is a fine, not a payout. And the investigation was still done, quote, internally. For all the publicity that Washington is getting from turning things around their front office, the previous regime of people there they're demonized. They're persona non grata going forward. There's no way these people should get jobs. They probably will in due time, but there's no way any of them should get front office jobs again going forward.
We started with two very deep and dark stories. Let's give you a good one. New England Patriots player, offensive tackle Justin Herron, was honored by Tempe police on Wednesday for stopping an alleged sexual assault on Saturday. So good for Justin Herron. Apparently, he, along with another gentleman, Murray Rogers, saw a older woman being attacked by a younger man. 30-year-old man was attacking a 71-year-old woman and was attempting to remove her pants. Herron and Rogers managed to stop the attack. And, good for Justin Herron for being a good human being. We need more stories like this. Roger said the victim called him and Herron her angels.
Yeah, definitely some good news for the league. Hopefully the law enforcement out there in Tempe actually, the legal system puts this guy in jail.
That'd be nice.
Unfortunately, we've seen a situation too often where Good Samaritans come to the defense of a woman being assaulted, and the guy who is charged with the assault is oftentimes let go.
Or then files some sort of crazy lawsuit against the guys that stopped him, that they assaulted him, which is ridiculous. It's not the way the world's supposed to work. I'm just happy that it was one of my guys, one of the Patriots. So, of course
you are.
I'll bring those stories to the forefront every day.
Of course you will. Look, this at the end of the day, this is still a bright spot on the overall cloud over the NFL right now outside of football.
Let's talk about football and specifically free agency. One of the free agent questions that I had asked before free agency began was, do the Bucs have enough to repeat as Super Bowl champions? And apparently they have answered that question with a resounding, why, yes, we do. The Bucs now have returned all 11 defensive starters and all their top reserves on defense as well. They have re-signed or tagged all their offensive options other than Antonio Brown and Leonard Fournette. And one could argue Antonio Brown is simply gravy to that wide receiving core, and Fournette or another running back is necessary for the Bucs offense moving forward, but it doesn't necessarily have to be Leonard Fournette. And by the way, they still have an NFL draft coming to fill those particular holes as well. They have not added any outside free agents, rather re-signing all of their guys here, James. So Tampa Bay feels fairly confident that they can do it again.
Yeah, run it back, as they say.
No, don't say that. I'm so tired of that phrase.
Nah. I'm going to say it again. Run it back.
No. Oh, God. Nails on a chalkboard just occurred.
Yeah.
Terrible.
Music to my ears. Jay complaining. But look, if they're going to do it, the best way to do it is to bring back literally every key piece. And right now, the majority of those key pieces were on defense. The way that defense was set up and run, you might as well, considering that none of your coordinators were hired away, story for another day that we'll get into down the road. But none of the coordinators were hired away for head coaching openings this past offseason or this current offseason. So if you're still going to be running the same system with any nuance, you might as well bring all the guys who ran it last year back. It's oftentimes difficult to plug new pieces in a system already established. But like you said, with all 11 starters on defense and the key reserves coming back, and like Antonio Brown being gravy, I don't even think they need Antonio Brown. Yes, he helps. He adds depth. Doesn't look like they're losing anybody. They tag Godwin. Everyone else is on the contract. Fournette, you can argue, is also gravy as far as their running back room because Ronald Jones, their supposed lead back. If he can stay healthy and they can find somebody complimentary in the draft, you don't need to sign Fournette. Not to mention, they still had some guy named LaShawn McCoy riding the pine for 15 of the 16 games last year because he literally only played 8 snaps of one game.
Yeah, LaShawn McCoy's done. He's not an answer.
I didn't say he was an answer. I'm just saying if Jones can stay healthy and they find somebody in the draft, they can still work in McCoy.
To that, I would agree. Yeah, that makes sense.
Another body in the running back room would help. It probably won't be Fournette considering he has a case to warrant more money than he played for last season. Because remember, Jones got hurt in week 14, right. 15, and Fournette took over and was the lead back for the last 4 games of the season and all the playoff games.
No, I think I agree with you. I think Leonard Fournette is a better than a backup, better than a co-back role. He can be a lead back.
He can, and he's still young enough to take the pounding.
Right. So I think the problem for Leonard Fournette is obviously the lower salary cap, and 2, there aren't that many places that still need a lead back. And if they are, they don't believe they need a lead back, which news just in, you need a lead back.
Yeah, you need a lead back. It's good to have a complementary group, but you need to have that one guy you can lean on down the stretch to either break a team's will or just completely break their system because he's a dual threat. And while Leonard Fournette put more passes, I think last year in those 7 or so games in which he was the lead back for Tampa Bay than he did almost in all his time in Jacksonville, there's still this irrational knock on him as far as catching the ball, which I don't understand.
Here's a place where Leonard Fournette could not go to become the lead back because they signed a guy who can become their lead back, and that is the Atlanta Falcons, who signed Mike Davis to a 2-year deal. This is according to Josiah Anderson.
Josina. Look, Mike Davis to the Falcons is a twofold move. One, it helps the Falcons running back room as the running back situation last year wasn't great. I'm pretty sure MJ is still high on Ito Smith. He's probably happy about this move. I'm just randomly guessing. I haven't talked to him recently in about a week or so. So I look at it this way: it bolsters their running back room. One, two, it takes depth away and it hurts the Carolina Panthers because remember, this is the guy in Carolina who basically did all the work last year as the dual threat back without Christian McCaffrey because McCaffrey only played 3-4 games last year.
And Davis, he didn't play many.
Yeah, and Mike Davis was the guy, and he put up significant numbers. I would love to hear from any fantasy football pundits out there as far as Mike Davis's value, in Carolina last year, as far as how much he helped or hurt in any way, shape, or form. But in the actual
he was huge.
But the actual X's and O's standpoint, I think this is a big, bold move because now McCaffrey gets hurt. What are the Panthers going to do?
They're going to have to draft a guy.
Yeah.
I'm a little surprised the Panthers let him go. I mean, it's not like the Panthers didn't have any money to keep him, but I mean,
they let him
Christian
go.
McCaffrey is the guy. So to keep Mike Davis happy, I mean, Mike Davis probably wants to be a starter. Maybe that's the thing. I mean, he's definitely the starter in Atlanta, right? There's no way he's got any competition for that role in Atlanta.
No, because who was the former Rams back they had last season who couldn't stay healthy?
That's Gurley, who is no longer on the team.
Yeah, so, I mean, you don't have that to worry about. Yeah, Mike Davis can be the lead back with Ito Smith splitting time with him.
We had a little conversation before we started recording about this guy. He signed a 1-year, $10 million deal, including $8 million guaranteed. That is according to the Katz brothers, who I'm guessing are his agents, to remain in Indianapolis, and that is wide receiver T.Y. Hilton. I would argue that T.Y. Hilton was probably the best wide receiver available out of all the wide receivers. PFF actually had him ranked as like the 8th wide receiver, and I said I could perhaps acquiesce and say Kenny Golladay was the number 1 wide receiver in that regard.
Yes.
Taking Godwin and Allen Robinson off the board because they were tagged.
Mm-hmm.
Golladay would have been number 1, but T.Y. Hilton would have been number 2 for me. So the fact that he lasted this long and ended up going back to the Colts on a fairly cheap deal, I think that's a big move.
Well, and again, we had this conversation before we went on air. He is currently 31 years old. He'll be 32 in November. So, and the last 2 years, not too great. 2019, he missed 5 games due to injury. The stats were 45, 501, 5 touchdowns. Last year in 15 games with Phillip Rivers, 56, 762, and 5 touchdowns. So 11 more catches for 260 more yards under Phillip Rivers as opposed to Jacoby Brissett and McCowan the year before. I mean, yeah, I get it. He knows the system. This is going to be his 3rd year under Frank Reich. So, and it could only help for Carson Wentz because heaven knows that if he's going to have time to throw the ball, he needs to have trusted targets out there, and he's probably the best target to throw to in Indianapolis right now.
I don't know what the Colts were waiting for. The Colts spent like none of their salary cap in free agency.
No, but they did let players go, which is shocking.
It is shocking. I mean, even the Jaguars, who I'm looking at over the cap right now, who are still number 1 in regards to cap space, spent at least half of the cap space they had. So got to give it to the Jaguars for actually spending money. The Colts haven't done anything in that regard. And so I wonder what the Colts' plan is to make the team better around Carson Wentz.
I have no idea because honestly, outside of T.Y. Hilton, I don't know who else makes up that receiving core. I mean, they did bring back Marlon Mack.
Well, I will tell you exactly what they have going on around him. They have Michael Pittman Jr., who was a second-round draft pick in 2020. They have Paris Campbell, who was a second-round draft pick in 2019. They have Zach Pascal, who was okay in limited role. It looks like they may have signed J.J. Nelson. Yeah, that's their wide receiving core.
And the tight ends are still Jack Doyle, Mo Ali Cox. I am, yeah, they needed T.Y. Hilton. they just needed T.Y. Hilton. There's really no real receiving threat in this group outside of T.Y. You can count on Jonathan Taylor and Marlon Mack out of the backfield, mixing some Nyheim Hines. But as far as their receiving options, players downfield, even the tight ends, Jack Doyle's more of a blocker and Mo Ali Cox is inconsistent. And the rest of the receiving group is quite young.
I was going to save this one for Neil, who's not here, but they also did sign the guy who Neil accused me of making up his name, Sam Tevy, for their left tackle position, off my bargain free agent list. So I'm very excited that they got a tackle.
Yeah, they definitely needed one. But this is going to be an interesting season for the Colts. Look, I know everyone was high on them last year rolling into the playoffs. They had a shot to win the division at the end. I hope they can repeat as wild cards because as far as I'm concerned, that's probably the ceiling for them with their roster as is right now. Defense is probably going to have to carry this team more often than not.
And Malik Hooker is still available. Now, I know he's coming off of an Achilles, but I mean, I would bring Malik Hooker back at the very least, assuming that he can still play, which I guess Indianapolis would know, and maybe that's telling. Maybe I just answered my own question.
Probably.
From Adam Schefter, former 49ers defensive end Kerry Hyder signing a 3-year, $16.5 million with upside to $17.5 million with the Seattle Seahawks, per his rep at Eric Burkhart. So the 49ers lose a top defensive end, pass rusher, and the Seahawks get a pass rusher.
Yeah, something the Seahawks desperately needed last year because up until they signed, oh gosh, why am I blanking on that lineman's name? Was it Dunlap they signed last year, halfway through the season? It was Carlos Dunlap. He played 8 games for the Seahawks last year, recorded 5 sacks in 8 games. So he did give them a spark on the defensive end position because their line wasn't generating much. The highest output was 6.5 from their tackle, Jaron Reed. So, and again, Jamal Adams led the team in sacks with 9.5. So you can't keep relying on blitzing Jamal Adams. Otherwise, you might as well make him a linebacker and put him up there with Bobby Wagner and just start blitzing all day. He's better playing safety. The defensive end signing helps. This probably means that Dunlap may not be back, but, you know, if he takes a veteran minimum, maybe he'll be back and help that line out even more. But good signing for the Seahawks, bolstering the D-line. Hopefully they get more pressure from the edge rushers as opposed to just blitzing the safeties all the time.
I'd seen online that there were 49ers fans that were really upset that they lost Kerry Hyder. This did not make them feel better about their team.
No, what's going to make them feel worse is the free agents who become available next year on their defense who decide to go to the Jets.
Oh, that's a very good point. Richard Sherman, by the way, still available. I don't think the 49ers are going to re-sign Richard Seymour either.
Yeah. Probably not.
All right. Next signing here. Oh, look at this. From Field Yates, at Field Yates. The Eagles are signing quarterback Joe Flacco for his agency at JL Sports 3.
How dare you, Field Yates?
Joe Flacco. Hey, he's
Field
won a
Yates,
Super Bowl. He's a Super Bowl winning quarterback, James.
Oh, gosh. He's also a bum quarterback who can barely stay healthy, has issues with accuracy, consistency, and overall solid play. Granted, the Jets weren't world beaters last year, but he definitely had fans wishing for the health of Sam Darnold for the little bit of time he did play. Nothing was inspiring out there, and he's been brought in to be the backup to Jalen Hurts. I emphasize backup because there are definitely better options out there at less money than Joe Flacco for backup.
Are there?
I would have rather had Tyrod Taylor.
He's not available. He's in Houston.
I know. which makes me wonder, why do we wait so long if we were looking for a veteran to bring in as a backup and let Tyrod Taylor slip through our fingers to sign this bum Joe Flacco?
Hold on. I think I can find a guy for you. Let me go find my best available. I mean, this is part of the segment that's going to be at the end of the show. No, you know what? We'll wait until the end of the show. That'll be a tease.
No, because, I mean, look.
I will find a better backup quarterback for the Eagles for James.
Look, how about this? The next guy we're going to talk about would have been a better backup than Joe Flacco.
Well, this story has really got me scratching my head. This is from Ian Rappaport. Raiders quarterback Marcus Mariota is expected to sign a reworked contract with Las Vegas. Sources say he'll get a one-year deal worth $3.5 million with a chance to make up to $8 million, including incentives. It was up and down the last few weeks, but he recently made the call to stick around. Now, this is rare. You rarely see a guy who's the subject of trade rumors who has 1 year left on his deal that is worth way more than what he ended up renegotiating. You never see a guy stick around for less money who's the subject of trade rumors. I don't understand any of this. This doesn't do the Raiders any favors. It certainly doesn't do Marcus Mariota any favors. Marcus must really like it in Las Vegas.
Hey, look, what did he play? A half and a game in place of Carr last year because of injury. Yep. He actually played pretty well in that game and a half that he played. Took a lot, and granted, I don't think they won the game he started, but he was definitely the bright spot for the Raiders in that game because it was abysmal for them. But it was easily probably the best game he's played in his career. And whatever he's learning from Gruden out there, he probably wants to stick around to absorb more, maybe hone his skills a little bit better as a pocket passer, use his legs as a last resort instead of just being identified as a dual threat. But to your point, Jay, yeah, he was the subject of trade rumors because initially he didn't want to rework his contract, which the Raiders were trying to do to gain more money under the cap. And he was aware that if he refused to rework his deal, that he was going to be traded. I don't know what changed between then and now that he decided to finally rework his contract because they were about to cut him because they couldn't find a trade partner. And understandably, no one was going to pay a backup quarterback, even if it's Mariota, that much money. So whatever kumbaya come to Jesus moment they had between his agent and Mike Mayock, the GM, must have been a good one to keep both parties happy because now they get to keep their backup quarterback at a price that's, cap friendly for them. He gets a deal that keeps him under contract so he doesn't have to, lag in limbo because I doubt many teams will be clamoring to sign him now. And he probably didn't want to wait till after the draft to see who picks him up as a backup later.
Here's the thing. He would have made more money on the market, even if he was cut, than what he renegotiated. So again, I don't think this makes any sense. Unless again, this is answering my question that he wouldn't have made more money on the open market. That's the only way you renegotiate to stay with the team.
And that's the part that's probably clicked. He probably wouldn't make more money signing with another team because if you look at it, the only way I can see him remotely keeping close to what his deal was before the restructure is if he signs as a backup to a team that's going to draft a rookie quarterback in the first round. That would be the only way.
Hello, there's a certain team that I'm a fan of that could have used him and is way better than the current quarterback option.
Well, I don't think the Raiders are going to fall for the 7th round pick banana in the tailpipe again like they did with Randy Moss.
They were going to cut him. So they could have cut him, and then the Patriots go sign him. And I guarantee the Patriots would have given him, let's put it this way. I think the Patriots would have given him the exact same deal they gave to Cam Newton, and that's more money than what he signed with the Raiders. And he would have been the starter, and he would have made all the money because I guarantee you would have hit the incentives that Cam Newton won't, because Cam Newton doesn't know how to throw a football anymore. I'm just saying.
Oh, gosh.
I'm just saying.
We need to come up somewhere in this offseason before training camp starts. I'm going to come up with a baseline of stats for Cam Newton that he should hit. That'll pretty much make you say, okay, I was wrong as far as over under those numbers.
No. When you come up with that baseline, I will tell you they will almost all be under. and if they aren't under, then they aren't going to be good enough to win football games.
Oh, wow.
All right. I don't think Crazy Jared got to react to the Adoree Jackson signing. The Giants have been aggressive this offseason, according to @Field Yates, mentioning Leonard Williams, 3 years, $63 million. That's $21 million a year. Wide receiver Kenny Golladay, 4 years, $72 million, $18 million a year. Max value of $76 million. And now cornerback Adoree Jackson, 3 years, $39 million. That's $13 million a year. Max value of $44.5 million. Adoree Jackson is great when he's on the field.
I
should say if he's on the field, and it's the if that is very large.
Yeah, because this is a guy who's battled injury in his career, but like you said, he's on the field. I won't say shut down corner, but he's definitely one of the best there is. So
he's pretty good.
It helps the Giants secondary because we belied
anything could help
last year. Their front seven was pretty much what carried them. Their secondary let them down often. So, he's definitely a bright spot for that secondary to both of them. I still think they probably need one more or the proper scheme. But getting Leonard Williams, put him up there to help to bolster that front seven. Look, if they plan to get pressure with their front four in every single down, there's very little the secondary has to do. And I guess that's the route they're trying to, go going forward. But I still think they need to put one more solid body back there in that secondary to help out. Galladay is arguably the best receiver in free agency that we talked about when this whole period started. He was one of the guys we expected to go during the initial frenzy period of free agency, as many other wide receivers, but that didn't happen the way we expected, and other guys got paid ridiculous amounts of money for no real reason whatsoever. I'm looking at your team, Jay. But I think Galladay helps give Daniel Jones a solid number one target that he can go to and rely on play after play without any reservation or hesitation as far as his read and reacts. The problem still with the Giants offense, barring any issues with health, is still their offensive line and keeping Jones upright. A lot of his successful plays last season were 3-step drops. He had to pretty much make read 1 and 2 and either throw it away or run for his life if he wasn't getting hit by then. So I'm still waiting for the offensive line signing from the New York Giants. I haven't seen that. Maybe there's one coming after the draft, but unless the system is changing as far as their blocking mechanics or changing as far as the O-line coach, Galladay looks great with the Giants right now is all I'm saying. Daniel Jones will need time to get him the ball, especially on some of those deep routes.
So to address a couple of the things that you've mentioned, and in their cornerbacks, they obviously have James Bradbury, who's a number one corner, and they also picked up Isaac Yidium from Denver as a free agent. So they did add to their secondary with Jabril Peppers and Logan Ryan as their safeties. Maybe Malik Hooker.
Yeah, those two guys.
Maybe Malik Hooker is a fit here. Maybe Malcolm Butler is a fit here if you want to add to the secondary. In regards to their offensive line, I have heard Crazy Jared say the offensive line isn't as bad as people keep talking about it. They do have a first-round draft choice in Andrew Thomas at left tackle. They have a second-round draft choice at left guard from 2018 and Will Hernandez. Nick Gates is their center. Kyle Murphy is I think a draft pick from last season. And Matt Pert is their right tackle, who's their third-round pick from last season. So maybe they need another offensive lineman. They are picking in a spot where they could get an offensive lineman fairly easily in the NFL draft.
It couldn't hurt because, like I said, Daniel Jones didn't look, passing numbers aside, just he never looked comfortable in the pocket like he had trust in the five guys in front of him. He just didn't. He looked like a deer in the headlights more times than not.
Let's move now to talk about the new NFL television contract. And I don't necessarily want to talk about the details of the contract. It was huge. People, there's already rumors out there saying that the salary cap next year is going to essentially double. I'll believe that when I see it. I see no way the owners are going to double the salary cap. First of all, the owners
182.5 this year, down from 188 last year. Yeah, I don't see it happening.
Yeah, there's no way that they're going to go to 360 next year, which is some of the things that I've been hearing lately. There's no way. First of all, the teams that have managed the cap well won't allow those other teams to catch up. This is just, and then secondly, how in the world are they even going to spend? I mean, they'll find a way to spend it, but that would make the entire pay structure just absolutely ridiculous at this particular point. We think $40 million a year for Dak Prescott is a big deal. Oh boy, double the salary cap, and all of a sudden Patrick Mahomes is renegotiating his long-term deal.
Absolutely.
So I don't want to talk about like the business side of it. It was a big deal. The NFL made a lot of money off of the rights, but here are some of the things in the contract that might have gone underreported. Some of it hasn't gone underreported. For instance, Monday Night Football now has flex scheduling. To me, this has always been one of those head scratchers. ESPN still pays the most for the rights for Monday Night Football. Their price point didn't go up as much as the others, but that's because they were already paying almost twice as much as Fox and CBS for Monday Night Football. But the Monday Night Football games were always terrible.
Yeah. And also remember, them paying the most was a way to leverage getting more playoff games, which they got.
And that never made sense to me. Like, why are we putting the worst games on a primetime schedule on Monday nights? That was just terrible. So now flexing is in place, and that seems to make a lot of sense to me. Let's not put our lousy games on our primetime shows. Let's get the best product we can to really market the league to new viewers and watchers. And as we know, ratings are down across the board for all sports. So
Jay,
let's put the best games out there.
Let's also take into account with Monday Night Football, like many of the other primetime schedules, Sunday Night Football, Thursday Night Football. Well, let's not take Thursday Night Football because that's supposed to be a showcase for all 32 teams to play on.
Right.
But with Monday and Sunday Night Football, you're looking ahead, and to some extent, the league does prognosticate, whether they admit it or not, when their 256 game schedule comes out and they see all the matchups. They're trying to put the best matchups possible on Monday Night Football, literally probably starting around week 6 to the end of the season, because early on teams are still trying to fill themselves out. So yes, it's not uncommon to find, when they were horribly bad, the Browns and the Bengals early on the schedule on Monday Night Football, maybe even the Jacksonville Jaguars week 1, if they warranted it or not, just to expose them to the rest of the country. Like, hey, here's a team that's actually playing that you probably didn't know about, and get those guys out the way early. the traditional powerhouses names that team names that you expect to be good towards the end of the season over the past couple of years haven't been that great. They always want to put an NFC East matchup on at the end of the year. That hasn't worked out well at all. This year it was the Eagles Giants, which was a dud of a game, which I think was also the previous year, and the year before that it was Eagles and Washington. So
these games. No, there's no way there was prognostication going. December 21st.
That has to be
was Steelers at Bengals. Right. There's no way they were like, oh, the Bengals are going to be contenders at this point.
Well, no. The only reason the Bengals were put on in that time slot is because they wanted the rookie quarterback out on there, but he got hurt weeks before by Washington.
No, then you put the Bengals on in the early part of the schedule. There's no way even a rookie quarterback is making the Bengals a contender that late in the season. Bills Patriots was the end of the year. There's no way prognosticating they were like, oh, the Patriots are going to be a great team in 2020.
They should have been better than what they were expected to be better than what they were. But again, no one saw 8 of your players sitting out the year because of COVID.
Well, and that's also true. I did say when they signed Cam Newton, there was hope that they could be a 10-win team and maybe the playoffs. But, oh boy, that was terrible.
And under normal circumstances, that would have been the case.
Now, usually, they always get the doubleheader in week 1.
Right.
So that's fine. But I mean, Saints at Raiders, Chiefs at Ravens. I mean, the Chiefs-Ravens in week 3 is a big matchup that you probably want further down the road.
Later in the year. Yeah.
Right.
Probably.
I mean,
look, I'd say with the exception of the doubleheader in week 1, because that's always involving 2 Western teams because of the time change, because you want the Eastern time zone to pay attention to those games. With the exception of week 1, you could probably flip the schedule upside down from last year, from week 2 forward, and it probably looks better, especially at the end of the season, because more of the better matchups were in the first half of the season than the latter half on Monday Night Football.
Patriots at Jets in week 9. Now, the only reason why that is because of the New York market, but then the week before that, week 8 was Buccaneers at Giants. So you already hit the New York market. And then you get a Cowboys game October 19th to get the Dallas market, which is always a big ratings getter. To me, no. I'm not buying I'm not buying what you were selling there, James. This was not great scheduling by the NFL to put the best games at the end of the season on Monday Night Football. And by the way, that's not me being an ESPN apologist because I used to work there. This is me being real. This schedule was terrible and has been terrible on Monday nights for a long time. So flex scheduling, thank goodness it's here. Here's something, obviously every one of these networks now has their own streaming service at this point. So a lot of the games you're going to be able to stream if you wish. And you mentioned Thursday Night Football. Thursday Night Football is moving to Amazon Prime exclusively. Except for local markets. Local markets will still have the game on broadcast television. But if you're not in the local market, you're going to have to get Amazon Prime to watch Thursday Night Football. And I think half of the Thursday Night Football games will still be on NFL Network.
Yes.
But Peacock, which is the NBC streaming affiliate, is getting the NFL Films library. So all those great John Facenda, all those great documentaries of the past from NFL Films will all be available to watch on demand on Peacock. That is huge. That's fantastic.
Absolutely.
So you may want to get Peacock. Plus, if you get Peacock, you'll also get WWE Network. So there's that.
That last part notwithstanding, I kind of wish we had Monty on right now to recite the poem, "The Autumn Wind is a Raider."
Oh my gosh. He knows it by heart too.
I'm pretty sure he does.
Now, this was underreported in the release of the new contract. CBS may produce more alternate broadcasts as they did in the wildcard playoff game with the Nickelodeon broadcast. I think that's good news because I do think that Nickelodeon game appealed to a wider audience that wasn't watching football. Maybe most of them were still watching football, but it was definitely produced thinking about the people that don't watch football on a regular basis.
Yeah, absolutely. Fundamental basic breakdowns of positions, schemes, players, and then what I found very entertaining, the slime cannon whenever someone scored a touchdown. That was always awesome. I did like that part.
I will only agree to the slime cannon being awesome if they actually introduce a live slime cannon and not just superimposed onto the screen. I want real slime being sprayed.
You do.
I mean, come on. That would be fantastic. Tubi gets in on the act. A Tubi. What's a Tubi, you ask? Tubi is apparently the streaming service related to Fox. Now, Fox will create an NFL experience on Tubi consisting of premiere video on demand, as well as condensed games throughout the NFL season. I don't know how great
So you won't
that
have to go to NFL.com for that.
No, you'll be able to go to Tubi to watch shorter games.
Interesting.
I actually have NFL news for you this one.
Oh, we have breaking news from my son who just walks into the room without an invitation.
Jakob Johnson, back with the Patriots.
Jakob Johnson, the fullback.
Yes.
From Germany.
Yes, the best fullback in the NFL.
Okay.
Behind Kyle Juszczyk and Patrick Ricard.
Okay.
No,
right.
He's not the best fullback in the NFL.
Arizona Cardinals.
Wait, what did you say about the Cardinals?
Malcolm Butler.
Oh, Malcolm Butler will not be available to help support the New York Giants secondary as he is going to Arizona. That's an interesting signing by the Arizona Cardinals.
Well, they did lose Peterson to the Vikings.
That is true. That is true. I don't know if that's the cornerback that Dr. Jones was looking for, however. Is this the cornerback you're looking for, Dr. Jones?
I mean, yeah. And Vinny Curry also just signed a 2-year deal with the Jets. So,
do you expect me to talk? No, I expect you to die. Let's see here. Malcolm Butler gets added to a secondary that includes Robert Alford and Budda Baker.
Yep.
That's it. That's it. That's the list. Yeah. It looks like the Cardinals need to do a lot of work on their secondary. Thank goodness there's some corners in the NFL draft. Although, are the Cardinals picking in a spot where they can get one of the top guys? I don't think so.
Possibly.
And there's one more, by the way, if you haven't noticed, I've been working off of this article from Awful Announcing to talk about some of these interesting things. Amazon is going to have a weekly NFL show of some point of some state. Prime Video will get a weekly slate of original NFL programming and expanded rights to in-game highlights for all NFL matchups. So, they're sort of thinking it might be a Madden-centric show because, Amazon also owns Twitch, so they could do something there. It could be something like NFL Films Presents, but highlights to game, game highlights, having the rights to game highlights. Maybe it's another recap show, right? It's just what we need. It's another recap show. The other thing for Amazon is if they do well, if they pull enough viewers on Thursday nights, they could end up getting a playoff game, which would be interesting. Again, you would think that you would want your playoff games to be as freely available as possible. Mm-hmm. So that number better be a huge number for Amazon to get the rights to a playoff game.
Yeah, absolutely. Because
for it to make any sense.
Yeah, it's always baffling when you look at the playoff schedule starting in the divisional round. You see that a game you would expect to be on CBS or Fox ends up on NBC or ABC.
Right.
You know, it's a little thrown off. And not that I don't mind it, but this past year, all four networks got a game in the divisional round.
Yeah.
Now, while I understand wild card weekend, you want to have as many networks showing a game as possible, which worked during wild card weekend this year because there were 6 wild card games. But when you get down to the 4 games to determine the conference championships, it's a little jarring to see all 4 networks that broadcast your games all broadcasting a game. You know, and of course, the conference championships will still stay on their respective networks. CBS will still get the AFC championship. Fox will still get the NFC championship. But, yeah, look, I understand you want more of your broadcast partners to show more of the playoff games. It's all fine and well, and I get that with ESPN because their playoff games all air on ABC. You know, because that's their broadcast partner. So that part I get, and that's why they keep paying the hefty price for Monday Night Football to keep it exclusively there so they can continue to broadcast a wild card in the divisional round playoff game. So I get that much.
All right, let's move to Cleveland. Although I don't know why you would want to. I mean, Cleveland does not seem to be a great place to live. You want to live in Cleveland? I don't want to live in Cleveland.
But I mean, it can't be far from Canton, Ohio.
I suppose not. The NFL draft is going to be held in Cleveland, Ohio this year. It will include a free fan event, which I think is very interesting. It is being held starting on Thursday, April 29th through May 1st, and it will be held in numerous locations, including First Energy Stadium, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and the Great Lakes Science Center, which I guess is right across the street from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I'm not a Clevelandite, so I don't know. And I obviously just slammed Cleveland, so everyone from Cleveland's no longer listening to correct me. The one question was asked, would we still be putting the prospects on boats like they planned on doing in Las Vegas last year? Put them out there on Lake Erie. Let's put them out there on Lake Erie. The NFL draft main stage will be put in front of Lake Erie. Lake Erie will be the backdrop for the NFL draft main stage. So let's hope for some sort of crazy, nor'easter coming through. I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility of snow in Cleveland, April 29th.
No, it's not. No, it's not. I mean, still scheduled to start at 7 p.m., 8 p.m.?
Somewhere around there. The commissioner will not be in his basement this year. He will be on this stage making all the announcements. There'll be other special guests. They will be partnering and making selections all across the country on day 3, as they've done the past few drafts, which is always an interesting move by the teams deciding where they're going to make these announcements and who's going to make those announcements in particular. The draft theater will act as the viewing zone for the main stage and will seat invited guests, including individuals selected for the exclusive quote unquote inner circle presented by Subway. There you go. Go buy your Subway sandwiches so you can be invited into the inner circle. Again, I think that's a wrestling reference. Just saying. Lots of interesting things. I mean, they're going to have people at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. They're going to have headlining acts performing on the main stage. This is all great, but I do believe we're in the middle of a pandemic. I don't think
we are.
I don't think that we've reached full herd immunity yet at this particular point in time. This doesn't sound like this sounds like a super spreader event to me. Although if you're going to be in the inner circle, you must be fully vaccinated.
Absolutely.
So
now that part is good forward thinking, that the people who will be there in attendance, as far as whatever fan structure in person thing they're having, as far as people being there, have to be vaccinated and they have to have proof of said vaccination. Can't just walk up and say, yeah, I've been vaccinating. And I'm pretty sure they would still be asked to wear masks as well. Goodell being there in person, kind of a foregone conclusion once they announced the draft was going to be in Cleveland. Prospects do have the option. They don't all have to show up. They can stay home if they so choose. I'm expecting, and this is just me personally, I expect at least half of the first round prospects to stay home. I honestly do. And probably have events in their home with, because at that point we're talking what's the date again? April
29th.
April 29th.
Nope.
So we're talking about the end of April. Hopefully more and more people get the vaccine. You can have larger crowds in your home, provided everyone is vaccinated. Barring that, everyone who enters the prospect's home should have been observed, should be doing some type of social distancing weeks in advance.
That's not happening.
Worked out. Look,
there's no way that's happening, James. I mean, we even saw it this last draft. The families were not. The families were like off the camera, but it was like as soon as they thought the cameras were off, they all jumped on there. I mean, I don't know how you plan on policing that, and I have no idea how they plan on policing the crowd. Now, they said that they're going to have an NFL draft experience, which will be free and open to the public. However, to manage capacity, reservations will be required to attend it. But again, based on all of the CDC guidelines and rules, I mean, they're going to have to disinfect that thing, right? You see the signs. Well, I see the signs in restaurants and whatnot. They have to disinfect the bathrooms once every hour. This is going to be, I just don't know how they plan on policing this. I really don't. Look, I mean, think about Nashville. Nashville was the last time we saw one of these events. That place was packed. And I got to imagine Nashville is bigger than Cleveland. I could be wrong.
Possibly. But, I mean, any city looks bigger when you invite the whole country to, come down on top of your metropolis and you have a litany of experiences and events from one end to the other of the draft area. And that's basically what Nashville had. I mean, the last live we draft, you could see the camera footage from above. Even on day 3, there were still crowds of fans out there. It still looked like it was day 1 on day 3. So as long as there's something to do, the masses will descend upon the populace. And granted, I'm not expecting what we saw in Nashville and Cleveland. Heavens, I hope not, despite vaccination. We're not ready for that. But I'm trying to be as positive as possible as far as a good outcome, as far as, sizable turnout, people doing what they're supposed to do as far as social distancing, if not getting vaccinated, vaccination if they can, and maybe this all working out in the best possible light for the NFL. The last thing I hate to hear is after the 3-day weekend, fans popping up, oh, well, the draft experience turned out to be a COVID spreader event. That's just not a good look on the NFL at all.
Well, that I can guarantee you right now that's going to happen. There's no way the NFL gets out of this without having any sort of link to a COVID spread in Cleveland.
Well, I mean, I've been meaning to check in, in Tampa for the beginning of this month and the end of February, considering, the nice little spreader event they had for one Super Bowl team winning down there. But haven't heard anything about their numbers popping up, or maybe the officials down there decided not to, talk about their numbers going up.
Well, Florida has also had another spreader event called Spring Break, which...
Oh, gosh, don't remind me. I've seen the news. I wish I didn't, but I've seen it.
So I don't know how you're going to get numbers that will link anything to anything at this point. But sure, we'll pretend that can actually happen. The announced cast has been announced for ESPN and ABC. If you don't know, Mike Greenberg will now be the host of the NFL draft because, of course, Mike Greenberg is ESPN. He will be joined by Mel Kiper Jr., who will be doing his 38th draft. That is amazing. Think about how far we've come since Who the Hell is Mel Kiper Jr. to where we are now.
Absolutely.
38 years. That is fantastic. Louis Riddick this is his 7th draft, Louis Riddick.
Yeah.
Really? 7?
Yeah.
I don't feel like he's been around for 7. And Booger McFarland will be joining the desk for his 3rd NFL draft. Off to the side to do the draftee interviews and provide other breaking news will be Susie Colbert, Chris Mortensen, and Adam Schefter. Now on ABC, they'll have a completely different desk featuring Reese Davis as the host, along with Maria Taylor, and of course college football analyst Kirk Herbstreit and Desmond Howard, and Todd McShay will be there. Also from a nearby set, we'll include Jesse Palmer and David Pollack for some more analysis there on ABC. I got to say, I might tune into the ABC crew. I mean, I like Louis Riddick, but can we put Louis Riddick in with these guys? That would be nice. Just saying.
The same company owns both networks. You got your pro crew on one channel, your college crew on another channel. It works out perfectly for them.
I don't have word on the NFL network, but I am assuming the same. The regulars will be there. Be curious to see if they bring back the Stanford head coach, who's usually there on the desk with them. What is his name? It's escaping me right now. The head coach of Stanford, though. Anyway, I like him too. He's an interesting addition as an active head coach on an NFL draft desk. It makes for curious commentary. So there you go. Thank you. There you go. The NFL draft live from Cleveland, April 29th. And I should take this moment to mention that the Superfan Super Mock Draft, in which all of the superfans will act as the general manager for their team. This is not a predictive draft. This is what they want their team to do come NFL draft on April 29th. We'll present that to you in 2 parts starting on April 22nd. So the week before the NFL draft, you'll be able to get the Superfan Super Mock Draft, which is always a lot of fun. It is a huge endeavor for us to endure. And so hopefully you will stay tuned for that. Remember, click that follow button wherever podcasts are heard so that you never miss an episode. James, as we're wrapping things up here, let's talk about some of the best available free agents as we have reached the end of free agency here. And the number one guy, you want the number one guy according to NFL or the number one guy remaining according to Pro Football Focus? Actually, I wonder if it's the same guy.
It might be the same guy.
Hold on. Let's see. It is not the same guy. Tell you that right now.
Wow. This is interesting.
Nope.
Hit me.
The number one guy still remaining, according to the NFL, is Jadeveon Clowney. Overrated.
No, that's a typo.
Nope, it's not a typo. He's right here. He was actually ranked 7th in their top 100. He just recently had a visit with Cleveland. I thought I saw he was going to have a visit with the Broncos. I could be wrong. My guess is Jadeveon Clowney has outpriced himself for this particular market. He has done nothing in his pro career to say that he could be an upgrade to anything that any team has currently. Unless you have 0 pass rush, then he is an upgrade, arguably.
Goodness gracious. I wouldn't spend money on him.
The number one remaining free agent, according to Pro Football Focus, is Anthony Harris from the Minnesota Vikings. Safety is always a weird position.
Wait. Safety Anthony Harris?
Yes.
You mean the same safety Anthony Harris that the Eagles signed last week?
Oh, see, Pro Football Focus, update your website properly. They still have Anthony Harris as unsigned. My apologies.
It's quite all right. But yeah, the Eagles did sign him.
All right. Well, then I happen to know for a fact that this guy is not signed, and that is cornerback Richard Sherman.
Yeah, he is still available.
Is the top, according to Pro Football Focus, is the top remaining free agent at corner. I have a feeling he's going to remain unsigned for a little while too. I don't know where Richard Sherman ends up. I thought he'd be signed by the Jets by now.
Yeah, I don't know if a team wants him. Because, again, look, I'm not going to say he played horribly last year for the handful of games he played with Frisco when he was healthy, but you could obviously tell he was, one, a step slow, two, not the Richard Sherman that we're familiar with from his days in Seattle, and three, the most glaring thing that almost everyone is going to say, will he move to safety? And I think that's a big deal, that third point. Because the team's probably not going to bring him in unless he's open to the idea of moving to safety. He could be a versatile DB in the way that Malcolm Jenkins is for the Saints, where he does play primarily at safety, but, on those spread 3 and 4 wide receiver sets, he's playing your nickel corner as well.
This is why I thought he would be signed already with the New York Jets. The Jets need help in their secondary. They don't have anyone of note other than Marcus May at free safety. They do have LaMarcus Joyner on their roster, but he's listed as their second strong safety, not even their starting strong safety. That's Ashton Davis. Blesson Austin and Bryce Hall are currently listed as the starters at corner, with Javelin Guidry right behind them, who was the draft pick last year and is super fast, but I don't know if he can cover. He's just fast. To me, Richard Sherman makes sense with the New York Jets, and he's playing for Bob Salah, who he's a big fan of. He was the biggest cheerleader for Bob Salah going into the coaching hirings. I don't know why this match hasn't been made yet. The Jets have plenty of cap space if they wanted to make a signing here.
Yeah, and let's look at the Jets defense or whatever's left of it.
It's not very good. Here's the thing. The Jets have made a lot of signings that I don't think they've made themselves really any better. Sheldon Rankins and Carl Lawson are their two big defensive signings, along with Gerard Davis at inside linebacker. These are their big defensive signings. Okay.
And they did just recently sign Vinny Curry at defensive end. I'm looking at the corners, and projected right now is Bless Austin and Bryce Hall as a starter. Corey Bellatine, Justin Hardy, and Javelin Guidry.
Yeah, I said all these names. Thanks for paying attention, James. Their secondary needs help.
I have to see it for myself, man. Look, LaMarcus Joyner and Marcus May at safety. Okay, but maybe they want. I don't know. Maybe they're betting on these young corners. They couldn't hurt from a veteran, though. But what veteran is left out there that you'd want to bring in? Because I don't think who's left as far as corners?
If we're going to skip to potential corners,
and I would look at NFL instead of Pro Football Focus, because a lot of these players have already been signed.
Well, the NFL, it's tough to see. It doesn't allow you to sort by position. And we just mentioned Malcolm Butler just got signed. That's the thing. A lot of these guys.
Bashard Breeland is still out there.
Okay. He could definitely help.
Quentin Dunbar and Casey Hayward.
I mean, other than the fact that these are definitely older players.
Yeah, they're all 29 and 32.
Listen, You could do a lot worse. You could stick with your current secondary.
Oh,
and then by the way, that is just their second. That's just their defense. Look at their offense. Their offense hasn't really improved that much either.
I'd rather
Corey Davis, Denzel Mims, Jamison Crowder, Keelan Cole. That's the bulk of your wide receiving core now. Is it that much better than what you had last season? I don't think so.
No.
Your offensive line, Mekhi Becton, who was your number one draft choice last season. That's great. You get Alex Lewis and Greg Van Routen and Connor McGovern. George Fant at right tackle. I don't know if your offensive line is necessarily better either. You still have a big hole at tight end, and your lead running back, as listed here on our lads, is LaMichael Pirine.
Yeah, scratch that. Might be Tevin Coleman, who they just recently signed.
Tevin Coleman can't be a lead back. I love Tevin Coleman, but I know he's not a lead back. To me, number 2 is where the NFL draft starts this year. And I'll throw this out, and I wish Neil was here because Neil would say I might be crazy, although I don't think I am. I think the Jets could take Kyle Pitts at number 2. Kyle Pitts is getting a lot of hype right now in regards to being maybe the best athlete in the draft this year. To me, Kyle Pitts might make the most sense for a team if they decide they're going to stick with Sam Darnold and try and improve the weapons around him rather than start over with a brand new quarterback. And this class is getting a lot of hype for teams that need a quarterback, and that could be 5 quarterbacks in the first 5 picks of this draft. But I'm not hearing, other than Trevor Lawrence, any of these guys being difference-making type quarterbacks. Zach Wilson, who is generally accepted as the number 2 quarterback in the draft, is he really going to come in and make a team a contender in the first year? I don't think so.
No.
So if I'm the Jets, Kyle Pitts might make the most sense for me in the draft to really help improve my offense. And I definitely need another running back. Leonard Fournette?
Well, yeah, possibly. We know teams aren't drafting running backs in the first round anymore for whatever reason. But there are a multitude of ways the Jets could go here. I know a lot of pundits have them picking Zach Wilson. I don't think they do that, like you said, if they still want to see what they have in Sam Darnold. They're also not going to draft a running back when, unfortunately, the mindset of almost every front office is running backs are a dime a dozen in the draft. You can get a running back anywhere in the draft. They could go one of the big 3 names at wide receiver. They could take Kyle Pitts. They can get arguably one of the best defensive players in the draft. They could also go for the best offensive lineman in the draft. So,
how about James Conner?
James Conner would be good value for them. I think Conner probably wants to return to Pittsburgh, though. Needle not moving too much on running backs this during the free agency. And there aren't a lot of big names out there.
No. You're now looking at really the bargain basement. At quarterback, really, there's only one quarterback left, and that's Alex Smith. And that's if you believe Alex Smith can still provide you any sort of mobility whatsoever.
Yeah, but Alex Smith probably wants to prove that he can still play, let alone start. And, there was an article that came out after the season ended. I believe it was in the Washington Post, in which they interviewed the head coach, Rivera. And when it came time to play him, he was actually scared to put him out there. They had actually considered bringing in another quarterback instead of playing Alex Smith when his number came up.
But he played.
He did play.
So that's fine. That was last year. We've seen that he played. He played okay.
Right. It wasn't great, but how many other coaches probably still have that mindset as Rivera's like, I'm afraid he's going to get hurt again and on that same leg? Because Rivera that was the reason Rivera initially put him as the number 3 quarterback on the depth chart. Of course, that all had to change when they cut ties with Dwayne Haskins and made Kyle Allen the starter.
The best tight ends, is Gerald Everett still unsigned? For some reason, I feel like he signed somewhere.
Gerald Everett, I believe, signed with the Seahawks.
Yeah, which I think leaves us Trey Burton. Which I'm a little curious that Trey Burton hasn't found a home.
I mean, he can always come back to Philadelphia.
He just might. But he's going to be behind Dallas Goedert.
Of course he is. And that's probably let me put it this way. Under the old regime, he could come back to Philadelphia. Under the current coaching staff, I don't know what the deal is because one Zach Ertz has been given permission to seek his own trade, which now probably won't happen until after the draft.
Some of the best offensive linemen are, one, you have the 2 tackles that the Chiefs let go, but they're also all over the age of 30. You have Mitchell Schwartz. You have Eric Fisher. Sorry, I'm trying to scroll down. You have Austin Ryder, also former Chiefs center.
Alejandro Villanueva, 32.
So you're looking at older offensive linemen if you're looking to fix that particular position. Defensive line, we mentioned Jadeveon Clowney off the top, but you're also looking at older pass rushers: Justin Houston, Carlos Dunlap, Melvin Ingram, KJ
Everson
Wright,
Griffin,
who's a linebacker. Everson Griffin's on this list. So again, if you want an older guy who's willing to accept a role and not a starting role, right? That's the conversation you have to have with these guys. Justin Houston has to look at his career now as, I'm going to come in on passing downs. I'm not playing all 4 downs anymore. And that makes you a little less effective when they know, here comes Justin Houston. Let's double up that side. Or let's make sure we run the play opposite or run a ball right at him.
And for the vast majorities of these best available free agents, especially on defense specifically, age is working against them. You know, they may still feel good and feel like they can contribute on an every down basis, but these guys are, for the most part, 30 to 32 years old, a couple of 33-year-olds in there as well. But they're all 30 and up. And these are the best guys available in free agency. Not a lot of teams willing to, as far as key positions on defense, want to spend money on 30-year-olds. These are the guys who, unfortunately, they're going to have to wait till after the draft to get signed.
I'm surprised Malik Hooker hasn't found a home yet. I get that he's coming off a torn Achilles, but still, Malik Hooker, to me, he's 25 years old, just under 25 years old. To me, he's a difference maker in a secondary. And that's what the
Xavier Woods is 26 and plays safety. He's still out there.
And that's it. That's all we got. Unless we want to talk kickers and punters, which we do know.
Please no.
So how about it? We want to hear from you. nextfanup@gmail.com. You can tweet us at NFU Podcast, Facebook.com/NFU Podcast. Another great way to follow along in the conversation. Be sure you're following us. While we won't have another podcast coming up this weekend, I do believe next weekend there'll be another podcast coming. I believe at least I'm going to try and convince the weekend guys to go division by division, declare the king of the division, and we'll base that off of analytics we have here at Next Fan Up. And if every team in the division did better or worse, to get closer to the king. I think that would be a fun show. So I'm going to try and convince them to do that. For us next week, here's some exciting news, James, because we teased this at the beginning of the offseason. We are finally going to redraft and properly grade the 2016 NFL draft. How about that? We're going to turn our focus. Yay. We're going to turn our focus on the NFL draft starting next week. So be sure you are following wherever you listen to podcasts so that you can get that wonderful show. I wish we had more super fans with us, James. It would have made for a longer conversation, but I always enjoy having a podcast just with you.
Yeah, as do I. I enjoy having the podcast with me as well. And just wonderful. As far as the bow tie on free agency for this segment, I will say keep an eye out on players visiting teams. That seems to be the nail in the coffin for a deal to get signed. Galladay visited with the Giants, got signed. Flacco visited with the Eagles, got signed.
Yeah, but Jadeveon Clowney visited with the Browns, did not get signed.
Yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
There are a number of players visiting with teams today, yesterday. It's probably a matter of time before a deal gets hashed out. But typically, if the teams are bringing the players into the facility for a visit, strong possibility they get signed.
Much like the NFL teams, we're going to turn our focus to the NFL draft starting next week. We'll talk to you then. Here's Kofi Annan. There you have it.
Dear friends and colleagues, saying goodbye is never easy. I believe we can all feel proud of what we have done together. And through it all, you have maintained your professionalism and commitment and remained true to the spirit of the Charter. That principle.
We go out, we hit people in the mouth.